Psychoneurology is the study, the practice, and ultimately the application of how the brain and nervous system can be used in concert to create the highest level of human thriving. Psyche refers to the mind. Neurology here refers to the nervous system, specifically in the context of its interaction with the mind. Psychoneurology defines these two terms from the process of their interaction with each other. Psychoneurology's mission and definition are pretty much the same thing, whereas psychology's definition and mission are somewhat divergent, and I'll explain why. In psychology, the definition is about the study of the mind and how it works. But the actual practice or the mission of psychology tends to be this process of identifying pathologies and disorders and negating them or removing them, with the understanding that if we remove all dis-ease and disorder, that the individual will come upon eventually thriving by themselves on their own. Psychoneurology, on the other hand, believes that in order to achieve anything, the mind needs to be told specifically what to do. So its focus is on giving the resources to those who need it to help them specifically learn or integrate the resources required to help them really come to this space of thriving. And that's the distinction. Psychoneurology is certainly not a form of psychotherapy for the following reasons. The very approach on the fundamental premise that we have in psychoneurology is entirely different from psychology. The premises are so different, it can literally be compared to the difference between believing that the earth is flat or the earth is round. So in psychoneurology, we believe that individuals are whole, perfect, and complete right from the beginning. In psychology, there's a fundamental understanding that they're taking from allopathic medicine, which was originally that individuals on the level of the mind or psyche have some form of disorder and disease. And therefore, the focus becomes, like it is in our mainstream allopathic medicine, to negate the disease or disorder. In psychoneurology, by contrast, we believe that people are whole and perfect. And what is coming up is really having a lack or a need for a specific resource to help them grow and thrive in the face of these new challenges. So if we take the example of a child that's been diagnosed with a learning disorder, for example, in mainstream psychology, our focus would be upon identifying the disorder and trying to remove the disorder under the premise that the disorder is really what is stopping that child from having the abilities they need. In psychoneurology, being that we come from the premise that the child or the individual is already whole and perfect, what we start to look at is what's needed here, what specific resources needed here. So for an example of, let's say, a diagnosis or someone labeled with the learning disorder ADD or ADHD, a psychoneurologist would help them understand that what we need to do is add the resource of being able to focus and stay in this focused, concentrated state we call the alpha brainwave state. Virtually every human being can learn to develop this state and move into it automatically. So as a psychoneurologist, rather than focusing on the ADD or the learning disability and getting rid of it, we merely identify the resource that that child needs to have for a lifetime of high functioning. And we help them acquire and develop and integrate that skill so they'll have it for the rest of their lives. The American Board of Psychoneurology chooses not to use licensure at this point. And we looked heavily and researched the American Psychological Association and psychiatric associations for this, being that they are, unlike neurolinguistic programming or any of the other modalities that are out there, they are the ones who pursued licensure. Now, the president of the APA at the time was Carl Rogers, who actually rued the fact that he was involved in the licensing for the APA and actually regretted it. In his book, A Way of Being, he talked about a number of the reasons why he regretted it. Specifically, one of the largest was because of the fact that once licensing was in place, the most skilled leading edge therapists were often the newest therapists or those out there doing things, but those who had had the licensing the longest often had very old skills that were even antiquated compared to those on the leading edge, yet those on the leading edge were the ones that actually had the lowest priority. Those with the seniority, he felt, were the ones who were actually running the APA and actually had the lowest level of competence. So we've made a concerted effort to make sure that we keep credentialing for all our psychoneurologists, that every year they have to be updated in their training and that they are constantly and continually moving forward. But for the senior psychoneurologists, those on the board itself, we have much more stringent requirements. They actually need to be right on the leading edge, being involved in new process and protocols that we're developing at Barron University every single live dynamic summit. Unless they're on the leading edge, unless they're constantly helping us innovate the field, they cannot retain their position on the board. And that's why we choose board certification at this time. If we feel with integrity we can hold those same type of standards for licensure, then we'll look at pursuing licensure at that time as well.